Hi, my name is Dan Texera. I'll be going over this material with you and an overview of Agile and the Scaled Agile framework. You're reviewing this material because you and your organization are new to Agile, to Lean, to Scrum, to Kanban, to possibly Scaled Agile. This material that I'm about to review with you should take about 45 minutes to an hour to review. Feel free to re-listen to it, rewind, and hear back terms that you do not. Please also know that there are several references that you can go to. First of which is scaledagileFramework.com, as well as any reference materials that we've sent along with this email. My name is Dan Texera. I am the Northeast Delivery Lead for C-Prime. And today I hope to bring you through this deck so that you understand some of the basis as to why companies go Agile, as well as some of the basics of people, process, and metrics that occur within each of the Agile, Kanban, and Scaled Agile framework. This overview is not meant to be an in-depth discussion. It is rather a video that should help you to understand the who, what's, and wheres of why we are going Agile. Hopefully, this recording, you will follow up with a session with one of our Agile coaches or myself to help you get into deeper thought process around this. Let's get into the deck and go through a couple of materials. So hopefully coming out of this, what we hope to achieve is that we understand what is Agile and what is Scaled Agile. We're going to familiarize ourselves with some of the vocabulary. We're going to understand the importance of changing of an Agile mindset, and a lot of that will be the discussions that I have through. As I spoke to before, this is not an aspect where you will become an expert, and if you're receiving this video, you should have a reference to it as to if you have any further questions or if we're having a follow-up session that helps you review this deeper. So let's start off first with Agile, its definition and its methodology. So what is Agile? Agile is a mechanism which leverages fast learning cycles to help us be successful under conditions of uncertainty in order to create value. We talk about Agile in the iterative process, and we think about building incrementally. We have a constant plan, do, check, adjust mentality, and we emphasize on focusing on people over processes. Focus on working software over interactions, and other circumstances where we take in consideration how can we orient value quicker. So a little deeper into what Agile, it is a philosophy that helps us to deliver better quality business value. It's a collection of principles and values that were established as a grassroots movement down in 2001. Some of the words that you've already heard me say is iterative, incremental. These all mean getting slow increments of value. Also terms like progressive elaboration, which means that we know more today than we knew yesterday about any of the projects that we're working with. We also have a term called empowerment. So we want to empower our teams to be successful at what they're doing. We want to enable collaboration. We want to get a mindset of experimentation. And then we do get a series of transparency and efficiency by going with Agile as well. Who is using Agile? So 73% of organizations use Agile routinely. 46 of them projects plan to use Agile in 2018 or a hybrid version of Agile. So it is something that we're seeing growing as a market trend over some other things. Now, the reason that companies are going Agile are mainly to accelerate software delivery. They also want, in a way, to increase ability to manage changing priorities. We are in a world right now in which our customer needs constantly change, our software is constantly evolving, and our teams are really unable to keep up with it. And the standard processes in which we define and then build things in 6 to 8 months spans does not allow us to keep competitive within the market. Some of the other aspects are along keeping productivity and gaining better alignment across silos within an organization, such as business and IT, but also within IT itself, QA and dev, or hardware and software pieces. The solutions we're building today are not only exclusively software development pieces, but they're also integrations of hardware in spaces like where we see with airplanes, elevators, cars, different types of hardware that's in place. Some of the benefits of going agile is that you're able to manage this change in priority. So rather than getting in a notion where we respond to change, we're building a framework in which we're able to adhere and kind of adapt to changes that are coming through. We get an incredible amount of alignment and visibility more than ever before. Our traditional red, yellow, green statuses really don't tell us much. Our phase gates don't tell us enough. And this project visibility really gets us to how are we making progress on gaining working software. And overall, what you see here, it gains us a lot amount of productivity and also creates a better team morale. So exactly what is it? What is this notion that we're talking through? So your traditional waterfall went through a cycle where we were defining, we were designing, we were developing, we were testing, and then we possibly released. We went through these phases and actually had phase gates to hold it through to try to hold some risk mitigation to it. Unfortunately, what happened is in these cycles, there's no risk mitigation. There's no value being achieved. And many times what we've defined here has taken us 9 to 12 months to release here. In an agile format, what we're looking at is every 2 weeks. Some organizations do work in 3 or 4 week sprints, but traditionally we want 2 weeks. We are coming together and we're planning, we're kind of doing, we're adjusting, and we're retroing. And hopefully with that, we come out with these boxes represent working software. Now, when we say working software, this could be working software that goes out into the customer's hand. This could be internal working software that focuses on a component and a component of a larger solution that's coming together. This could also mean the hardware or software piece of what we're building on an incremental basis. So we could be building the physical portal in hand that we could then update and test out and validate a specific software in place. The whole point is that every 2 weeks, as a team, we're getting together, we're leveraging our demonstration to show the business what have we built and to get feedback from the end users as to how can we build it better, what things can we do to help us improve to that. Now, once we get into these incremental builds, what we want to do is make sure that our stories are written in a way that allow us to build incrementally. So we don't want to have a series of stories that say, do all of your analysis, do all your design, do all your code, do all your testing, do all your deployment. Within an iteration or within a sprint, we also don't want to see a story that says your analysis, your design, your code, your test, and your deploy. Actually, if you do this within a sprint, it's going to be more harmful because you actually squeeze testing and validation towards the end. What we want to get into a notion is that within a particular sprint, we are taking a story and doing some level of analysis, some level of design, some level of code, some level of test in a very collaborative fashion. So this instance here really should show more collaboration to get a story to done as soon as possible. We're starting along the concept of starting less. In our waterfall project, we defined a ton of work, we designed a ton of work, we developed a ton of work, we tested, and hopefully released large batch sizes. In our incremental, we're doing small batch sizes, and those small batch sizes allow us to test and learn how our software and how our hardware keeps together. So here, we're starting less, focusing on finishing more, focusing on finished stories to its completements to get to a deployment. This is another view on the same thing that we're looking at where we talk about we do not want stories to show based upon the domain. We want to build a series of cross-functional stories that hit on all of those. In order to then deliver upon those cross-functional stories, we do need cross-functional teams to deliver upon that as well. Now, Agile does flip our traditional iron triangle upside down. So for a second, I want you to think about what would, think back to your PMP days and the studies that you did for your PMP, and remember some of the basis around our iron triangle. So we had scope, schedule, and cost. And we considered that the iron triangle because if you were to increase your scope, you either had to increase your cost or increase your schedule. Now, traditionally, the fixed constraint would be your scope. We want to deliver this. And the parts that would be variable is our cost, because we can throw more people at this, or our schedule. We can throw more time at it. When we think about Agile, it actually flips the iron triangle upside down. Our variable cost, or our fixed pieces, our fixed and constraint pieces, now become our cost and our schedule. We have 100% dedicated Agile teams. Your cost for those teams remain constant throughout. You have a fixed price time over time for all those teams. Those teams now work on a fixed schedule. Every 2 weeks, as we talked about before, they are planning, building, validating, and retrospecting on what they should do. The part that becomes variable is those features. A product owner is setting out what the work they want the team to do. They are constantly prioritizing that work and filling it into buckets within the sprints and seeing how much work can we fit within that sprint, and where we can't fit it because of the team's capacity, we then push it on to the next sprint. So our scope becomes variable. Now, you may be hearing this and saying, how can this be possible? How can we get to it? It isn't completely feasible, but we have to take and consider a couple of things. Our Agile teams must be dedicated. We must have a collaboration between the Agile teams and our product owner, so that the product owner understands the constraints that are in play and helps to prioritize and sequence out the features as needed. So let's go a little deeper on this. The real world, let's say. There are 3 things we wish were true. Customers knew exactly what they wanted, developers knew exactly how to build it, and nothing would change along the way. And if we were to do that, then our traditional waterfall way of development would be the essential way to go. Unfortunately, these 3 things are actually what we live with. Customers are constantly discovering what they want. Developers discover as they begin to build how the solution comes about. And along this path, many things change. Many things change. So we spend, rather than spending time up front designing, building, and analyzing around what should be done, we want to get to a point where we just start building. And as we're building, the developers discover what needs to be built. The customers, our product owners, begin to learn more about the solution. And maybe we're able to get some solution out there that the customer is actually able to play with and provide that feedback with. And so on that cadence-based delivery, it allows us to manage that change in fully. So a little bit of what Agile is and what Agile isn't. So I want to start on the right-hand side here to what it is. It is not. It is not cowboy coding. It is not a space where teams are able to go off and code whatever they want and do whatever they want without any guidance. There is still documentation. We do still have a plan. Milestones in Agile still exist. We just base milestones based upon working software rather than basing milestones upon meaningless gate phases that occur. It is not a guarantee to go faster. You will get more efficient, but there's no guarantee to go faster. There is still a level of management that we need. We need to make sure that our management is enabled to evaluate and support this Agile team. It is not a silver bullet and won't work. It will work still with some Agile projects. So where we have some fixed capacity projects, we will work with those. And it is not something just for tech. Rather, it is a very, very disciplined process. It enables us to write the right documentation for the right audience. It is an aspect of continuous planning. We are constantly looking at what can we do next. So once a team gets into sprint planning, they will plan out their work for that first sprint. Alongside of that, the Scrum Master, Product Owner, and other SMEs are beginning to build a backlog for Sprint 2 and 3 sequentially. So we're constantly in a mode of planning what's the next thing to have based upon the local information that's being received. We do want to enable, and it does enable value sooner, so you will see demoable products sooner. It does help teams to self-organize. It's highly collaborative and iterative, and there is aspects that do this for the entire organization. So let's talk about some manifesto values and principles behind this. Right now you should be saying this seems like a good thing, but the first thing I want you to understand is, as we said here, it is not a silver bullet. This does not solve all of your problems. And the reason we go over manifesto and values and principles is because we want you to understand that this is a mind shift change. It's a mind shift change for management, for executives, for the teams. It is completely different than what we have done before. If we as an organization, or you as an organization, come along and just adapt, hey, your project managers are now going to be Scrum Masters. You're now going to be working in teams. And we don't think about the culture and mind shift change that this takes. We're actually putting lipstick on a pig and not realizing what the full value of going agile is. So let's go deeper into some of these manifesto values and principles. The first of which is the Agile Manifesto. Now with this, what we talk about is that we value the things to the left more than we value the things to the right. It is not that we do not do the things to the right, it's just that the things to the left are more value than the things that we have to the right. So we're going to value individuals and interactions over process and tools. We want face-to-face communication. There's better understanding when it comes to that. I have my own little personal rule with this one, in that I do not read an email if I have to scroll. If you send me an email that is longer than a page that I have to scroll, I pick up the phone and I call you, or I come find you and I talk to you. That email that you're writing needs a discussion. There's going to be question and answers that happen as a result of that, and we need to value the understanding that we get out of things by having those interpersonal discussions. We want to value working software over comprehensive documentation. I've said it a couple times in this talk, but requirements gates, design gates do not tell us what we need to be. Talking about, in order to validate the software is working, we want to integrate this system via API with another system, or we want to be able to see that a software has downloaded to a piece of hardware as a test case. That is working software. That is what we want to validate that occurs. We want to have customer collaboration over contract negotiation. This is the product owner role. This is putting a product owner in a place where they are collaborating with the team on what is feasible and what the team can achieve. And lastly, we want to make sure that we're responding to a change rather than following a plan. We talk about set-based design versus point-based design. We do not, it is in the early stages of a project, we establish a plan, and we keep very diligent upon following that plan to the T. That is setting us up for failure. What we want to create is an atmosphere where we have multiple options to get to an optimal solution. And we create a system that allows us to respond to change, learn from our behaviors, get in a plan, do a check cycle, and allows us to get to a better spot. So we want to think about these values as we're moving forth. And as we go forth through the rest of the presentation here, you will see that these values are an important thing to think about. Next, there's a mind shift change around leadership. We need to break the command and control paradigm. So we're going to talk about self-organizing teams. This is where we establish a system where we give enablement to the teams to make their own decisions. We tell them what our vision is. We tell them what we're looking to get out of the system. We indicate our requests via backlogs of features and user stories, and we let the team self-organize on how they can best do the work. I like to give a little small analogy here in that teams don't wake up every day, and people don't wake up every day, think they're going to come into work, and they just want to break tables all day. They're not going to come in and just make things better. People and knowledge workers, as all of our workers are knowledge workers, that means that they have more knowledge of the system than their managers. They want to come in to make the work better. Having a direct command and control and having a full answers to be to some single person is not what we're looking for. We're looking for great ideas to come from this self-organized team. And having an aspect of being a servant leader, enabling self-organization is what we're looking for. So let's talk a little bit about Scrum. So Scrum is a methodology in which people can address complex adaptive problems while productively and creatively delivering products at the highest value. It is a lightweight version, easy to understand, but very difficult to master. And within the Scrum fashion, we're looking to build out valuable products every 2 to 4 weeks. Let's look at it a little more detail into some of the roles and some of the processes. We have a backlog, which primarily at the team level consists of stories, where there is a higher program or portfolio. We may have a concept of features and a concept of epics. We have a product manager and a product owner that helps to prioritize this backlog. The product manager focuses on the features. The product owner focuses on the stories. From a team perspective, they are bringing these stories in to what we call sprint planning. A product owner will work with their team and their Scrum Master to see what is aggressively feasible. So this is something that we want to bring in things to the sprint that is feasible, but tests the team as to what they're capable of. The team has a known velocity based upon story points, so they know what they're capable of taking in, and they will begin reviewing each of these stories on a priority basis, estimating them, and finally committing to them. They commit to do that within this 1 to 4 week sprint. Once we have commitment, the team will task it out so they fully understand the work they need to commit to and do within that space. Along with that, as the team commits, the product owner and other members of the team may begin refining for future sprints as the team is developing for the current sprint. We will have daily stand-ups that help us monitor and check base the progress the team is making. And at the end of the sprint, we do a sprint review, which allows the team to demonstrate what has been completed. Hopefully, some of the stories that we've tried to complete have been completed prior. And during that sprint review, there's a final review which helps us to assess how did we do on achieving some of our sprint goals. The last thing as a part of our sprint is that we do a retrospective. Here we look back and talk about what could we have done better, what did we do well, and what didn't we do well. This helps us to set up a path for an aspect of continuous improvement. Now, these items as to what we did well and what we could do better are things that we do put in our backlog and make sure that we have them available for our backlog to support. So we have essentially 3 roles, 3 artifacts, and 1 cadence. And we've talked about this a little bit, but we have a product owner, a Scrum Master, and the development team. Holistically, that makes up the Agile team. 3 primary artifacts, a team backlog, which is the ever-growing list of what the team wants to commit to, a sprint backlog, which is what the team has committed to from that very sprint perspective, and metrics such as burn down, burn ups, cumulative flows. And the team goes through a cadence of sprint planning, backlog refinement, daily stand-up, demo, and retro. A plan, do, check, adjust cycle. The product owner is a member of the team. They act as the voice of the customer. They're responsible for setting up the vision making decisions on a daily basis in the direction and in responsibility of the customer. They collaborate to establish user stories. They do define and prioritize those user stories. They have the team and any system architect or engineer help to develop those stories. And as those stories are being developed, they help to answer questions from the team of what questions the team has on the development of those stories. And finally, they work to accept the work that the team does. One of the things that we want to look at is that the product owner accepts the story as early in the sprint once it gets accepted, so we focus on finishing more and starting less. The product owner is a team member as well. This is playing as the servant leader. Many times and most of the times they are acting as the coach. They are ensuring that we are following the sprint ceremonies. If we follow the sprint ceremonies, we see that there is an incredible amount of efficiency that's gained from the team. They shield the team from any external interfaces, and they help to kind of protect the team from those interfaces and help to remove any impediments that the team faces. When we think about risks from an Agile perspective, we don't historically have a risk log. Rather, risks are something that we tackle, break down, and resolve within that minute. They do act as a key facilitator, and they promote an incredible amount of transparency. They help teams to self-organize, and they help collaborate across several teams to help in dependencies to build a solution. They are not product managers. They don't tell the team how to solve technical problems, and they don't assign work. This is something that a well-organized Agile team gets to do. Well-organized and empowered. And it is the job of the Scrum Master to help them with that. Development teams are empowered, self-organized, self-managed. We do want to keep the core team to 5 to 7 people. This is without the product owner and Scrum Master. They are 100% dedicated to this team. And all the work that they do funnels in through their backlog. So there should be things, if they're getting work coming from other areas, they should ensure that all of that work is funneled in through their backlog. They own a joint accountability of the success or failure of the sprint and the release. They collaborate to build those commitments, and we want to see them in a collaborative fashion, where we don't have specializations within a cross-functional team, but they're working together to deliver functionality within that cross-functional team. Some of the characteristics that we look at as we bring these people together is they're going to go through your traditional forming, storming, norming, and performing stages. Now, when we talk about a team being 100% dedicated, they are going to remain performing for a long period of time. One of the traditional notions that we have is that we would have a team go through the forming, storming, norming, performing, and then once the project cut into play, we broke them out and made them into separate teams. That is the exact opposite of what we're trying to do here. We're going to have teams quickly go through the forming, storming, norming, performing, and once they are performing, we want to keep the teams as consistent as possible. This way, they're a team that helps to embrace change. They focus on finishing things. They work on ways to improve. They become self-motivated. They know and have trust within each other. They embrace what they're capable of doing, and they embrace a mindset of one team, one dream. Truly, nothing beats an Agile team. We talked a little bit about our sprint cadence cycle, and I will make sure that this deck is available to you via PowerPoint as well as this video, as I'm going to go through these next slides a little quickly as I went over them in the longer slide. But here in a backlog refinement, what we're trying to do is refine and prioritize stories, not only for the next coming sprint, but possibly for the next 1 to 2 sprints ahead of time. The Scrum system is a pull-based system. So if this team is to complete all the stories within the sprint that they are in, it is a pull-based system where they can pull into the next sprint. So it is the responsibility of the product owner to get into and make sure that we have stories refined for the next 1 to 2 sprints. One of the challenges that we'll see is building cross-functional stories. So this user story and backlog refinement becomes a critical process to make sure that we are capable and able to refine our backlog continuously and build stories that can be delivered by cross-functional teams and show value. They're not just chunks of work and not a work breakdown structure to your backlog, but actual pieces that show value. We then come into sprint planning. This is where we get into a concept of ask, task, and format and forecast. So the product owner comes in with the ask. We task and estimate and format out a series of stories, and then we go forth and set our objectives of what we're trying to do. Now this happens in the beginning of every sprint, and typically will be a 2 to 4 hour meeting. Our key outputs are to make sure that we have a sprint plan or sprint goals, tasks, and commitment to what needs to get done by the team. Once the team has committed, we begin looking at the daily stand-up. This is a 15-minute time-boxed event where every day the team comes together. They begin to help coordinate across the multiple pieces they are coming through, and they begin to tell the team, this is what I worked on yesterday, here's what I'm looking to accomplish today, and what impediments do I see in front of me. This fosters team collaboration, and it also enables the Scrum Master to remove impediments so that the team can continue to move efficiently and effectively. An effective team will have an effective daily stand-up. Many times what we see is it's very difficult to keep a stand-up to 15 minutes. We do institute a concept of a 16th minute, which helps us to have some deeper discussions after the 15 with a smaller subset of a team. We then have our sprint review or demo. This is where a time-boxed event of 2 to 3 hours where we demonstrate the work that has been done for the past 2 weeks or initial sprint, and we get feedback on what has been done, what is left to do, and was the story accepted, and how can we improve on this story, and how can we reprioritize our backlog going forth. Finally, we have our retrospective. This is where we want to get in a mode of thinking about what do we do less, what do we start, what do we stop, what do we keep doing, and what do we do more. The key aspect is that we do this on a regular basis, on a normal cadence, in short cycles. Retrospectives done regularly have been found to help the team improve systematically. Retrospecting on a large period of time will actually not improve because most of the things that come up will be bigger things that cannot be tackled singly by the team. We do want to make sure that as a part of a retrospective, the team brings those actionable items into their backlog to help them improve overall. A retrospective without that backlog item just becomes a session where people are complaining and not a session where we take action on how to improve. So we've talked about Scrum. What about when you have multiple Scrum teams, possibly an external vendor or supplier or something, and possibly even some hardware or pieces that are included within your software? This is where we begin thinking about scaling of Agile. Now, we talked about nothing beats an Agile team. Well, the only thing that will beat an Agile team is an Agile release train. Scaled Agile is simply a framework that helps to bring together a series of lean manufacturing concepts that get us to solve problems for more complex solutions and complex systems. Think about it first. If you are hearing this and you're part of a very complex organization, if we want to build a cross-functional Agile team that's going to be able to deliver software every 2 weeks, how big of a team would you have? Maybe 30, maybe 40 people to build that team? If we build that team of 30, 40 people, it then becomes very hard for those people to mobilize. It becomes very hard for those people to work as a team. We want to keep our team size small. So one of the things we talk about in Agile is creation of what we call an Agile release train. An Agile release train is a team of teams, and we want our Agile release train to be as cross-functional as possible. So where we can build cross-functional teams, we will do that. But where we have pieces of our system that need to be individual agile teams, we will do that as well, but keep them synchronized around an agile release train. Now, one of the things that we do to help this synchronization is do something called a program increment planning. And we'll get into that more in just a minute. So there are a couple of roles when we talk about the scaling of Agile, and most of these scale from something that is done before. The first of the roles I'm actually going to go over is the last one on this list, which is the business owner. This is the sponsor of the actual Agile release train. We then have a scaling from a Scrum Master, which is something called a release train engineer. Scaling from a product owner is something we call a product manager, and the scaling from the team is a solution engineer. So these are people that help to do those typical responsibilities across multiple agile teams which are forming that agile release train. Similarly to a Scrum team, we have a product backlog. We have a backlog for our program increment, which rather than working in 2-week sprints, these joining of agile release trains will work in 5 2-week sprints of 10 weeks. And we also have a series of metrics that come. The typical metrics will be burn up, burn down charts. We'll also look to have predictive measurement charts. We start with our PI planning, which is a 2-day event to align commitment across these teams for 10 weeks. We have a level of backlog refinement. We have our Scrum of Scrum, which is like a daily stand-up across multiple agile teams. And we look to demo and inspect and adapt, which is the program version of a retrospective. Let's go deeper into each of these. First, start out with our business owner. Again, these slides will be word heavy, and so they will be available for you to read as a part of receiving this video, but I'm going to talk briefly to it. This is quickly our sponsor to our release train. They will be part of critical ceremonies such as our program increment planning and also a part of our demonstration so that they can see the value oriented to the release train. They are typically ones who will be sponsoring the release train. They are typically ones that will be funding the agile teams on the release train. So they're looking to validate the value that has been received, and they're also hoping to input what value should be received out of them. Our release train engineer we talked about is our Scrum Master of Scrum Masters. So here, a Scrum Master at the team level is helping to facilitate that individual team. They're helping to be the coach of that team, remove barriers and risks to that team, and help to create a system where that team can truly be empowered and enabled. As a release train engineer, you're doing that same thing across multiple teams. You're helping to make it so that those teams are in a way systematically improving. We're helping to create a system in which those teams are getting better day in and day out and are able to work together to manage through their dependencies, their risks. You're tackling down the risks and dependencies that come up from those teams. You're also working and facilitating the key program events that occur. So you're facilitating the program increment planning, the Scrum of Scrums, our backlog refinement, our art sync, our demos, and our inspect and adapt. All of these you will be working as the coach to continuously improve on what's being done. Next, we have our product manager. This is the equivalent of a product owner. So we talked about a product owner being equivalent to a single team. Our product manager is the person who sets the priorities across multiple agile teams. They typically define what we call as features, and they set the priority across those multiple agile teams as they're coming in forth. A product manager will possibly have 4 to 5 product owners underneath them. Product manager is responsible for establishing the vision for the release train, the roadmap for the release train, and helping to feed features into each of the program increments. They are the person that calls the priority for the overall release train. They are the person that ensures and accepts the validation of the demos by each of the release trains coming in together. They work in partnership heavily with our product owners. and also our systems engineer to make sure that we're not just building we're not just doing work based upon the priorities, but also setting the path to clean up any technical debt, build quality scalable solutions. We call those a building up of our architectural runway and enablers. So finally, the role is our solution architect. This is a person who is helping to influence the backlog to make sure that we are building solutions that can scale, that we are building solutions according to the guidance that we see fit, and they are constantly in collaboration with our product owner, with the team, and building the liaison through with them. One of the other things at the system team, at the program level, is something that we call a system team. A system team is a team that helps to enable processes and tools to better help the teams bring code from development all the way through to production. These will be teams that help in early days before we have made these processes more efficient to do end-to-end testing. They will help to validate and move code through environments. They will help to enable that hardware is captured so that the software can be embedded within it. They will also begin to enable tools like a Jenkins, a code management tool, like a code integration tool that helps us get towards a more DevOps mindset and helps us to build the bridge between development, which is changing the environment, and operations, which is looking to keep it sustainable. One key aspect of this system team, as we start with many transformations, the system team will begin very big. And as they begin to lean out our processes, as they begin to build more automation, you'll find that we push more and more of those people onto the team so that we're pushing the accountability of testing, the accountability of building quality software onto the teams rather than to the system team. Typically, when starting off an Agile team, we also have a program Agile coach. This is a person which is setting the best practices, supporting the team, supporting the release trains, in helping them in a mind shift change as to figuring out how we used to work and how we will work going forth. They help to enable a building of a product roadmap, building of a product backlog. They support in early days and program planning events. They help in execution, making sure that we're doing effective daily stand-ups, effective scrum of scrums, and making sure that each team is enabled as an Agile team to be successful. They will also help and support the adoption of any Agile management tool, and then look to establish engineering best practices like TDD, automation, and some DevOps practices. Let's look at the cadence a little bit. As we think about our cadence, we start with our release train refinement. Our basis here is that we want to establish a backlog of well-defined features to be delivered by the release train. We do this on a weekly basis, and our outcomes are to have features ready, prioritized, risks and dependencies identified, so that we can go into our 2-day PI planning event and commit. Our release train engineers are a key facilitator. We support our product manager by enabling decisions, and we use our solution architect, engineer, and product owners to help refine our feature backlog. Remember, this is at the program level, so we're refining features, not user stories. This then feeds into our program increment planning. This is the pinnacle event when it comes to scaled Agile. We are bringing together everyone on the Agile release train. All of the teams, all of the hardware, all of the software, our business partners, our product owners, our product managers, our change management teams. Everyone that is needed to help bring software, to help bring the value to our customers from start to finish. Our point and inputs to this is that we have well-defined features, we've identified risks and dependencies, and we've prioritized our backlog. Our outcomes is that we commit to our PI objectives and features, we have initial story writing across our sprints, and we mitigate against risks and dependencies and help to coordinate across those dependencies. We will also may see that there's a series of decisions which are made at this PI planning event. Now, you may be sitting back at this point and saying, 2 days, over 100 people, how are we going to do this, and how are we going to pay for this? In a recent PI planning event that I attended, I had a clicker and was clicking through how many decisions were made during these 2 days events. I reached the number of 135 during a 2-day event. Some of these decisions were as small as de-scoping a user story to moving a user story to another sprint, and some of them were as large as completely changing what our features are, what our priorities are, and the allocations of teams to our release trains. The outcomes of this PI planning event is that we have alignment across multiple teams on what should be done and how it's going to be built for the next 10 weeks. In a recent discussion that I had with the founder of Scaled Agile, Dean Leffingwell, he began thinking about how this planning event is not just planning, but in many instances it is a design event. It is an aspect where we're coming in to align and find decisions and to figure out what we are going to build over the next 10 weeks and have that commitment as a joint team to build it. If you're thinking of how you're going to fund this, I ask you to think about how much time would it take to do all that design, to make all those decisions. If you think about it, we may spend 10 weeks just doing that, opposing to building software. So many times, we start with our PI planning event. It is the point that brings the release train together. It is the point that helps to kick off many Agile teams. Now, to support delivery within our program increment, we then have what we call our release train sync. This is a meeting which happens once a sprint, and it is to provide teams across the teams that have been together for PI planning, to provide them transparency into what has been going on from each of the teams. Here we will align on this team did this team did that, are dependencies still valid, are dependencies at risk, and how are we making on some of the commitments that we talk to. We also have our Scrum of Scrums. This is solely attended by the release train engineer and Scrum Masters. This is where the Scrum Masters are able to raise impediments that they had at the team level to the program level so that the release train engineer can tackle those down. We then demo at the end of our program increment, validate just as we did with our sprints, what each of the teams have built and how those solutions have been coming together every 10 weeks. Lastly, in our ceremonies, we have our inspect and adapt, where we bring together the teams similar like we do in a retrospective, but more in a problem-solving workshop in impediments that impact multiple teams rather than a single team, and how do we improve and get better at that. I want to thank you all for the time that you spent here today. Again, as I look back to the orientation of what we tried to do within session, is that we're trying to get you acquainted with the words. We're trying to get you acquainted with the thoughts. I ask that you not take this deck and believe that you are an expert, and you not take this deck and say that you've learned everything. There's still much more to understand and to learn, and we look forward to partnering with you and helping you understand that. I would assume that after looking through this deck, you have a series of questions. I ask that you bring that to our coaches, and we will help you along this path to help you understand. I want to thank you for taking this time with me over the past couple of minutes, and it's been a pleasure of mine, and I look forward to working with you in the near future. Thank you.